Hello, and welcome to episode 11 of the Odds and Ends podcast, where we talk about important issues and how likely they are to happen. And today I am joined by Ege Erdil, who is a forecaster and a researcher at Epoch AI, who are a forecasting AI, like an AI forecasting consultancy. They specifically forecast on AI. They do sort of like model sizes and other things we'll talk about. And also, my really smart friends think that Ege is possibly the smartest person they know. So I just want to be clear. Ege is a really smart guy. He does Math Olympiad problems for fun and I think at reasonable pace. This guy is not to be messed around with. That's the credibility rating I'm going to give here. Ege, good morning. And what is your relationship with forecasting?
Okay, so I started doing forecasting in, I guess, towards the end of 2020, after, according to my memory, reading Philtech logs. So I found out about Philtech logs work. I think actually through Brian Kaplan.
Mm-hmm.
These memories are a bit vague. And I read his book, his 2005 book, Expert Political Judgment, not his later, more popular books. And I just thought it was pretty interesting.
Yeah.
And at the time, you had, actually, you still do have some online forecasting platforms. You have like the Good Judgment projects, sort of open platform, and you have Metaculous. You didn't yet have manifold markets, so I couldn't join that, but I tried like both of these two sites. I ended up deciding that Metaculous was a better platform. So I did forecasting, I guess, for let me try to maybe like 1.5 years, where like more intensively. Later on, I started doing other things, so I didn't have as much time to devote to it. So it kind of became more sporadic. Nowadays, I just sometimes like when I see markets that are mispriced on manifold, I will go in and try to like correct them.
Yeah, we're going to be I tend to be well, I don't think it's too mean. Oh my god, I've got a search blocker. Maybe we'll turn that off in a sec because I use manifold just way too much during the day. But you know, if Ege doesn't do well on this, we'll show you my thing, which is not great either. But I imagine that I'm going to guess that you'll be reasonably in the profit. How are you doing? Oh,
I'm doing fine. Though, yeah, that should be me, but for some reason you can't.
Yeah, it's just oh, okay. So you know, you're not really a degen. I think is one of the things that we're taking here.
Yeah, you can click on all. I guess that's.
Oh yeah, that's true. That's only today. Sorry, I forgot. So Ege's firmly in the black. He's only made money since he started, and particularly in some big jumps. And I guess I can find those big jumps if I want. Oh, gee whiz. Okay, yeah. We're going to go back to that in a sec because
you only unblocked it for 1 minute.
I mean, I don't think this is a bad. I don't not endorse this really. My life, I would say, I've learned that if you have a problem, you should act on it, and I really do struggle to stay off both Twitter and Manifold. So we might, in fact, will this work now? I think I've just turned it off. Yeah, great. Okay, yeah. So you made money on. Oh, you knew about the superconductor. Seemingly, you thought that was not the case. And then an IDF hospital in Gaza, which that's some more recent stuff. But yeah, so like mainly flat, and then a few like big jumps. So you're you're finding specific questions that you know a lot about, seemingly, and then jumping.
It's not just I know a lot about. So manifold is different from Metaculous because it's a market. And in a market, what you need is for the market to be wrong, but also there to be a lot of people in the market so we can bet a lot of money without moving the price. And sometimes these questions come along which have a lot of interest and at the same time a lot of what you might call like dumb money on one side. And then you can actually bet at pretty large sizes and not move the price much. That's the ideal setup. And those questions come along every once in a while. And because I'm not like a full-time manifold user, I don't like bet on every question, but sometimes I see questions like this, and then I'm able to. So for instance, these big jumps, the one in like August of this year, that's a superconductor. That Honestly, I wanted to bet like real money on that, but I didn't have anything on Polymarket. This did have a real money market on Polymarket, but I don't have any money on Polymarket. And,
Yeah.
I just
And
I'm
I
always
don't.
a bit.
Yeah, Polymarket also, like, their resolutions aren't always great. So sometimes you can end up with situations where you're like, but yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. I still don't know. People use this as an example to criticize prediction markets and say, oh, yeah, prediction markets went crazy on LK99. But, like, we don't have the counterfactual, which I just struggle with a bit because it's not clear to me. Like, that could have gone on for ages, or it could have been in people's heads for a long time afterwards that actually maybe this was possible. We just don't know. And I think I don't know. It's just not clear to me that prediction markets actually didn't just like focus the discussion and then cause like a quick hype and ramp and then a quick slam down and like game over.
It is possible. I think it's better to have them than not. But
Yeah, but I guess like it doesn't seem like it's necessarily evidence. It's just like we're already at a prior that it's better, maybe. Or I don't know. Do you think anything in it provided evidence for or against?
I think it doesn't really provide evidence against, because I think we knew about this quote unquote failure mode of these markets for some time. Obviously, the earlier example was the 2020 Trump election markets. And there, what happened is after Biden had already won the election, so already Biden's win had been announced. Biden had not been inaugurated, but it was pretty clear he had won. For a couple of days, I remember that Betfair, which is usually more reasonable than...
I think it was more than a couple of days, but yeah.
Yeah. Like, it was Trump to be president. Like, Biden was trading at like 90 cents on a dollar, even though he had...
I mean, maybe this is just like me proving too much, being a shill or something. But part of me is like, that serves a useful social function. Like, what that did was just basically a taxation on being wrong about the world. Like, I'm very happy for people who understand that Biden was president to be able to get 10% return over a number of days, and for people to be charged a huge amount of money to believe something which is like very destructive and just wrong. So I don't know that. I mean, I think Betfair should have known better and resolved sooner. I think that's the case. But like as a pure like, oh yeah, you know, I mean, I think like that was some of the stuff is also just about market liquidity. People were asking why Biden. Somebody was asking why the Biden markets on Manifold are running at 83%, 10% higher than betting markets. Someone was saying, what is it that we know that everyone else doesn't know? And I think that is like a thought-provoking question. I guess the thing I think we know is like it's possibly just that these markets are sort of relatively more liquid in informed people, because predict it, you can only put in $700. I think if predict it allowed infinite money from individuals, I think you might see higher prices for Biden.
Yeah, I mean, obviously Betfair does allow infinite amounts of money, so you can sort of
that's Betfair. True. Yeah,
Betfair is usually more reasonably priced than predicted, but not always. So I think for the Biden nomination markets, I was looking at this a couple of years ago, and in fact, I know some other people who were, and we generally thought the pricing was pretty off. We thought Biden should have been priced much higher than he was.
Yeah.
I think this is the same thing of there were just a lot of people who are convinced that Biden is like has mental problems, or is sort of not healthy enough in various ways to be president or to run for president again. Like, they think he's going to be too old. They think there's no precedent for someone that old running for president.
Sure, but then why? Like, why do we think that Manifold should be more? Just because it's like the community.
So I don't know why. I mean, Manifold, I don't think was for a long time more reasonable. So you can look at the price history. I think Biden was like 50 cents on the dollar for a pretty long time.
Well, but that was still at this point. I imagine maybe. Let me look.
That was
September 15th. I imagine in September of last year, Biden was running at 40 or 30%.
Yeah, that's possible.
Markets, which is going to be easy for me to find things on. I don't know, and probably therefore even cheaper on Um, yeah, so March 23, September 22. Gee whiz, can you believe it? Yeah, running at
Yeah, it's
35%.
lower. Yeah, it's lower. So I don't know why. I guess uh, strangely, like there are more people who are, I guess, better informed on Manifold than on S markets
Yeah.
or other traditional market platforms. I like generally, I think the problem with these traditional markets is that there are a bunch of barriers to uh, funds or like shops with a lot of money to deploy to become involved in them. So even if the return is fairly high, usually it's at a relatively small size. I think the Trump election markets are kind of an exception. Most markets don't have that much liquidity,
Mm.
and so there's sort of no like the trading like shops don't become involved in these markets, and so it's basically individual sort of amateur traders who put their money on these platforms who end up determining the price. So you don't have someone who could like borrow a ton of money from some kind of capital provider and then put it all into this market to get it priced correctly. And because it's just competition between individual people, it's easy sometimes for the not the smartest people to have more money and then move become an obstacle to the price moving where it should. I don't know why it's easier on like I think the same effect exists on Manifold, but it just depends on who are the wealthiest users, who are the users able to put up the most money. I think on Manifold, the place where you see it most often is when a lot of new people sign up for a question, because every person who signs up gets a certain amount of money to play
Yeah.
with. If a lot of people sign up at the same time to bet money on a question, then that's like a huge amount of money coming on the other side.
Of like,
this is
quote unquote, dumb money. Yeah.
Yeah, like this happened like just
With the
last night.
LK99, yeah.
Yeah, just last night I was trading again this market about like did Israel blow up the hospital? This has been on the news like yesterday, and someone I know sent this market link to Richard Hanania, and then Richard Hanania tweeted about it. It was like, look, like prediction markets are saying, um, it's the one below, the question below. I think, this one. No, it's not this one. It's the one. The one I traded was the one by Milford Hammersmith. I think on the that one.
Oh right, yeah. This has some huge spikes.
Because what happened is the market got shared by Hanania, and then so I think this is right before like Wednesday 18th. It's just like there is this. It was at like 6-7%, and then there is this huge spike.
Yeah.
Right. So that spike is basically people coming from Hanania's Twitter feed and opening new accounts just to bet on this question, which is I think actually if you scroll down, Milford had a comment showing all the sign up bonuses he was getting from all the people who were signing up. I think it got buried a little bit because people are just discussing the attack here, but I found it a bit funny when he posted it.
Oh yeah, this
yeah.
Oh yeah, wow. So a lot okay. And then I guess some people just see it as like an opportunity to bet, to try to vote. They're just like, oh, I think this is the case. And it's actually sort of There are points that now we're looking at the.
They did make a Polymarket for it. Interesting.
And the Polymarket platform is, I guess I should explain for anybody who's listening on audio. It starts at like 50% and then actually not that rapidly falls to like 25 and then to 6 within I don't know a couple of days. And then, or like a day, and then it spikes up, which is, I guess, what we think is the Hanania share. And then there's like a long curve, so then it spikes to like 30, then it sort of jumps down again to like 12, then it has like a curved sort of 20%, and then over the course of yesterday and this morning has now fallen to sort of 7% in like.
So very interesting dynamic that was happening on this market is that I knew a bunch of people, including me, who thought the market was the no was being underpriced. So yes was being overpriced, I guess I should say. But because we thought later on there might be like more dumb money coming into the market, we weren't actually buying. Like we were putting limit orders above the current price because we thought that someone else might come in and hit these orders at like better prices than we could get right now by buying. And I think that has happened. Like my limit orders have been hit before at like higher prices than the market was trading at.
I think
so. That's not something that just sort of keeps the price higher, like because people are expecting more dumb money to come in later, which is it's kind of funny.
Yeah, I find this a tricky thing. Like obviously, like some of like trading is a real profession where there's like real skills, and like initially it's like, oh, you learn about like Kelly betting. Like initially you learn like return of investment, and then you learn about Kelly betting, and then you learn like return of investment over time, and then you start to learn things about like, oh, like where should I put my, like how much information do I want to give the market about what I'm willing to bet, and how do I like trade off those. And I'm sure there's many other things I don't yet know. But that is, I agree. Like that's something I've been like messing around with. Okay. I'm not going to apologize for that digression. I enjoyed it, and to an extent, I say these podcasts are for my enjoyment. But listeners, if you weren't at all interested in the quick rundown of Manifold, then I apologize. I don't apologize. I something. Okay, hit me with some AI forecasts.
Okay, so we had discussed some things before we started the podcast about. So we do forecasts at many different time horizons.
We being Epoch.
Epoch, you could say that, and that is some of them are like very long horizon forecasts. Like, do we expect AI to eventually like accelerate economic growth by say 3x or 10x, like for maybe a period of 5 years? Like this would be a long run question. We don't expect this to happen next year or in 5 years necessarily. It's just whenever AI gets good enough, do we expect this to happen? That's one kind of question. Usually the discussion around this has been framed by some research by Open Philanthropy, where they chose this 30% per year as the sort of the threshold of explosive growth. And so people have been talking about 30% for like just because that's what they picked.
Just for 1 year?
It could be for 1 year, so it's a bit vague. Maybe it's just for 1 year.
30% GDP growth in a year.
Yeah, not GDP. So usually people talk about gross world product when they talk about this. So basically that's the GDP of the entire world. But you cannot talk about a country like the US, or you can say like, will any country, any big country. Small countries could have a lot more variance, but will any big country, say a population of like 100 million or something like that, will see this kind of growth? Maybe you think it's going to be easier for like some country to see it than the whole world to see it. But this like 30% per year threshold for like explosive growth has been, I think OpenPhil was the one that was sort of converged on that, and then people have been using this. But there are shorter horizon forecasts. So another thing we could try to forecast is, say, in the next year or in the next 5 years or something like that, what sort of capabilities can we expect from the models we'll have? How much will they cost? So for instance, right now, if you want to run GPT-4, you pay like 6 to 12 cents per 1,000 tokens that are generated by GPT. So for people who are not familiar with AI, like one word is roughly 3 tokens, 2 to 3 tokens usually. So if you want like a 300, 400 word essay, a paragraph from GPT-4, you have to pay something like 10 cents for that right now. And we can ask, what will this be like in 2030? For the best model we have, is it going to be much more expensive or much cheaper or about the same? So that's another question we could ask. We can ask, how much will that model cost to train? So for GPT-4, we thought, I think this has now become relatively public knowledge, even though it was not described in the GPT-4 paper, that GPT-4 was trained with like something like $50 million. So the training cost of GPT-4 was around $50 million. If you wanted to train a similar system today, it would be cheaper because since then, NVIDIA has released a new generation of machine learning GPUs. GPT-4 was using A100s. Now we have these H100s, which are sort of better with more memory and more compute capacity and cheaper per unit flow. So if you want to train GPT-4 now, it will be cheap. And we can think about how much will GPT-5 cost, or how much will the whatever model we have the biggest model we have in 2030 is going to cost. We can think about how centralized it would be. So for instance, right now, the best models you access through APIs, and you have to pay an API provider, but there are other models that you can run locally. So there is this, there are these smaller models like there's Llama, which has different versions with like 7 billion parameters, I think 13 million, there's a version with 70 billion parameters. And then I think recently there was a model called like Falcon with 180 billion parameters that was released. These are all models that you can run on your own GPU. Like if you have enough memory, you can actually run these yourself, as opposed to using an API provider. And of course, they're worse than the models that are available via API. But you can also ask questions about these publicly available sort of open source models. How good will they be relative to the models, the best models, and how much, how big would they be? How big of models will you be able to run locally, as opposed to accessing them through an API? So these are just a bunch of different questions that are occurring to me right now. We can ask about specific tasks, I guess. So for instance, a task I think that has received particular attention is the ability to solve, say, Olympiad level math problems or programming problems. So a question I'm particularly interested in is there is this math/programming problem website called Project Euler. And Project Euler, they release a new problem every week. And to solve the problems, you need some mixture of math knowledge, math understanding. There's some math you have to do. But on top of that, you have to actually program a solution. So it's not that you can always get the solution by pen and paper. Usually you can't. Usually the solutions are pretty huge. You have to do it by computer. And I find it to be an interesting case because when people are testing these models on, say, lead code problems, these are like problems of the kind you get asked in interviews for like tech companies. Those problems are usually pretty standardized. I think very often, like because GPT-4, other models have seen so many problems on the web, usually they just know, like they have a good idea of how to do these problems because they've just seen so many different permutations of these problems. They can have a pretty good guess. And when I tested these systems on Project Euler problems, which are usually more novel and require more creative thinking, I found they are pretty bad right now. Like basically, a system does not help you at all solve even the easiest of these problems. And so I'm curious if that will change in the next 5 years or 10 years. Will we get systems that are good enough to be solving these? There's also there's this IMO question by 2025, which is in a similar spirit.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I think that'd be a great to get through those. So I mean, yeah, like I guess probably let's blitz through these. Give me probabilities for anything you want to give me probabilities on. Give me questions around them, and then I might push you on for some explanations. So let's talk about this economic growth. Well, maybe. Maybe let's try and get some forecasts initially about like the next 2 years. Like, what do you think the world is going to look like? What do you think AI stuff is going to look like in a year's time? Like, what kind of are there? I don't know if you like. I might start trying to collect some questions. I mean, a frame I sometimes think of is sort of like, will it be able to write a book that I find like superb? Will it be able to write like a less strong article? Will it be able to write? Like produce a short film that I like in a single cut that I'm like, oh wow, that was like a good film with like a plot that I found interesting. Like, I don't know if that's a frame you find interesting or if you've got a different one, but if you want, I find a load of questions like that, or if not, we can, So either give me some predictions or I'll find you some questions like that.
Okay. So you want predictions for the like in 1 year is the
Yeah.
horizon.
So like in a year's time. So we'll just do before 2025. So a year and 3 months.
Okay. So I think what's going to happen before 2025 is to a large extent going to be determined by which models are currently being trained. I think that's basically too soon for anything else to matter. So an interesting question is, will GPT-5 be released by the end of 2025? I think, like OpenAI has said, they are not training it yet. There have been some rumors, I think, that they haven't yet started training it as well, so probably that's accurate. I would guess that GPT-5 is going to cost. So if you look at OpenAI and how much capital they have raised, so they have made these deals with Microsoft's cloud computing provider, which is worth like I think over around $10 billion or more. So now they have like this much compute in like cloud computing credits, you could say. Like they have access to this much compute from Microsoft Azure. And Microsoft has this like own supercomputer that they've built to basically dedicate to OpenAI's work. I think based on the size of the capital raise, GPT-5 could cost something like $1 to $3 billion, like something around that range. And I would guess if they start training it next year, then probably it's not released by the end of the year. So because for GPT-4, what they did is the training was already complete, say by something like the middle of 2022, like the model was already here, but they didn't release it for a long time, maybe for 6 months or something like that, because they were doing various kinds of safety work. They were fine-tuning it. They were doing a bunch of things that I imagine they will be even more cautious with GPT-5. So maybe the delay will even be longer for GPT-5.
So I mean, 1 in 10, 1 in 20. I mean, how likely? Sounds like you'd be surprised if they released GPT-5.
Yeah, if they release in 2025, I would be surprised. I would
before 2024. So you'd be. I don't know. You're at like 5%.
5%.
Maybe not.
Maybe if it's more than 5%, I would not be that confident. I think maybe like 10% is fair. I think it would be below 20%. I think, but something like 10% or 15% seems fair.
Okay. Let's see if there's a.
Yeah.
When will GPT-5 be announced? What is announced?
Announced is they make an announcement about. It doesn't mean it's released. It just means maybe they announced they have it or something like that. Like I don't know what exactly that means. But I think a lot of these markets, especially in the low end, like when the probabilities are supposed to be low, they seem a bit mispriced again because
and manifold you shouldn't trust manifold markets beneath. I don't know. I think beneath maybe like 6% probably. I'm just like.
And there is no question by end of 2024.
Yeah, there's no. I mean, that's an interesting. Okay, so we might create that question later. That's like a question that seems to be missing. Okay. And then, so talk to me. Like, do you think GPT-5 is the only relevant one? Do you think there's other models that you think by the end of end of next year that you think actually this is the ones that matter? Or is it mainly GPT-5 that you're waiting for?
Sorry, can you repeat the question?
I mean, are there any other models that you think in that time might sort of change the game significantly?
Well, we might have, I guess, models on the image or side or some kind of multimodal model. But I expect that GPT-5 is going to be multimodal. Like it's not going to just be a text model. I expect it will have capabilities that are currently already in ChatGPT. So capabilities of image processing and browsing the web and a bunch of things. Whether it will be able to do video is an interesting question. I will guess yes, that this will have capabilities to process video, but I think they won't be like. I think they will be a bit. like I think if it's not going to be able to, like, but in 2025, I think we won't have models that are really good at generating video. I think we might have models that are good at sort of watching some video input you give it, summarizing what happens in the video, or answering questions about what happens in the video. I think video generation is going to be a bit more difficult, so we won't actually have solved this by the end of next year. But basically, you won't have the sort of video equivalent of something like DALL-E 3 or Midjourney. So for probabilities on these, maybe I even want to, like, I think we do have a meticulous question on whether the GPT-5 announcement date, but it's not the release date. So this is a bit. It's not the date it will be released or, like, available for users. It's just the date in which it's going to be announced. For that, the median seems to be like October, November 2024. This is the meticulous median on when it's announced as opposed to when it's released. I think it is possible that it is announced around then, because I think by then the training would probably have been finished. I'm mainly saying it's probably not going to be released in 2024 because I don't think they will release it the moment it finishes training. So
that seems.
Yeah, but maybe if 10% is actually a bit too low. Yeah, maybe I should go a bit higher, especially after looking at meticulous. I just find a bit. I don't know. I'll just go maybe a little bit higher, 15% or 20%. For other things, I guess you're looking for some kind of question here.
Yeah, I'm just so.
That's an interesting.
Yeah. So Richard No wrote a load of questions about things neural nets could do by the end of 2025. So that's a year later than we were talking about previously. Mm-hmm. And I turned them all into markets because I thought they were interesting. So will they generate at least one scientific breakthrough? Markets by that time, so before 2026, so about 2 and a bit years. Will they generate at least one scientific breakthrough? I think the criteria on this one is, like, they have to, they just have to be told, like, do a scientific breakthrough. They can't be told, like, oh, like, try and run me like 100,000 different types of protein or something.
So this would not count. Like AlphaFold would not count. Results.
So that's running at 44%. Coherent 20-minute films by the end of 2025. So again, like a year later than Ege was just talking about, that's like a 50%. Mm-hmm. Award-winning short stories and publishable 50,000 word books is 36%.
These are interesting questions.
It's got to win some awards. I mean, so first of all, if you see any of these you think are really wrong, that would be interesting. Neural nets will beat any computer on a typical 10-minute white-collar task. That's 46%, so maybe. Robustly planned over multiple days, better than a human, 26%, so possibly. So like 1 in 4. Human-level situational awareness, 50%.
I don't know. Some of these questions are a bit vague. So I would not, like, if I was betting on these questions, I would really want to care about the resolutions. For instance, like, what I think, like, human level situational awareness, like, it's a kind of a vague phrase, but the way I understand it, I think 50% is too high for that.
Right.
But it's sort of unclear what it means. So it's you would have to.
I guess, yeah. I think like something like. For like, you can ask it, hey, if you do this, like, what will happen? You can ask it where it exists. You can ask it, you can show it a photo of something and be like, discuss what's going on here. Discuss, you can maybe show it like some figures in action or it's a part of a movie or something, and you can say, what's going to happen next.
But it doesn't actually have to do anything in the real world. It just has to.
It just has to tell you like what's going on, what's about to happen. That would be
Yeah,
my
but I think that's a
understanding.
very like low bar, because I think that most of your situational understanding is entirely implicit and happens subconsciously. So
Yeah.
so like that doesn't mean it's human. That just means it's, like if a baby has a plenty of situational awareness, even though it can't explain anything. So
Yeah.
so I think
What
it
would you
is.
think a better question is here?
I don't know. I think there are maybe some questions just on this list that are a bit better.
Go on then. Yeah. What do you
So
like more?
yeah, let's look at this. So hold on. What is the thing that is at 96%? Oh, that's by end of 24. Okay, so you skip that. That's too late. Um,
So there's one on
yeah,
chemistry experiments, but I also think it's a bad question.
yeah.
I
So
wrote it, so I can quote it.
robustly pursue a plan over multiple days, better than the best human. So here already there's some ambiguity about, like, is this multiple days in like clock time, or is it multiple days of like if you imagine it's generating some number of tokens, you can try to convert that to a time by asking
No,
how
I
long would a
mean
human.
human days. I mean like you know, uh I'm trying to get at some kind of like management tool, right? So like uh you're told like you need to get permission to park your car by the council, and like you've got two teams and each of them has like a person at the end, but the person can only do what they're instructed to do, or so I'm telling my person, okay, you got to email the council, you got to like ask them permission, you got to respond to their email, you got to tell them the like number plate of the car, blah blah blah. And then the LLM is also doing the same with their person, and the
Ah,
goal is across a broad range of tasks, who can manage to achieve the goal across like following over a number of days. Basically, can I get an LLM to like manage somebody, but also can I get the LLM to manage me? Can I get the LLM? Can I say, hey, I'm trying to achieve this by Wednesday? Can you prompt me throughout the day to tell me what things I should break down a
yeah,
task?
yeah.
And
I
can it
think
do that better than I can do it, or better
so.
than
I
me?
think the main obstacle to this kind of capability right now is just breakdown of like coherence for very long inputs. So if you play with GPT-4, I think you realize that if you try to have like very long conversations, it sort of starts forgetting things. And
Yeah.
yeah, so this is the main obstacle right now. Like this happens even if you're like technically not within the context window. So there seems to be something else going on, where even if you're technically fitting into the context window, there's still some breakdown in like again, we don't know which architecture they're using, so we can only observe what happens. But I think it has been getting better. So I guess as a baseline, before even GPT-3, I think got released, they had there was a role playing game called AI Dungeon.
Yeah.
And AI Dungeon, what was happening is like you have these role playing games that people usually play with like other people, and you have this person called the dungeon master who sort of or organizes, or the game master who is sort of not playing the game, but is sort of saying what happens and directing the flow of the game for the rest of the players. And like people find that to be, I guess, an enjoyable experience because there's a human in there, and a human can be like very creative and very interactive. It's very different in some ways from playing a computer game where everything is programmed. And the idea was to replicate this by letting an AI system, like a language model, be a dungeon master. But of course, what happens when I try this kind of system is immediately you get like a breakdown. Like you, once there's any level of detail, anything that the model had to remember, it just immediately broke down. Now I think we could do this much better, but still there's the same problem persisting. It's just that the sort of horizon is getting longer. And there was a post by Jacob Steinhardt, who was forecasting a bunch of stuff about how, like, what will the GPT 2030 be like? So what capabilities will we have in the 2030? And I think his extrapolation was maybe by then, in human time, you might have models that can sort of work autonomously without intervention by a human for days. And sort of right now it's like minutes. It might become like days. I think by the end of 2025, that is I think fairly closer. So maybe 2 years out of the sort of 6, 7, until then. Like I think maybe you just sort of do a extrapolation. Like I think the how many minutes are there in one day? I think you have like 100,000 seconds, so you have a ballpark estimate is like 1,000 minutes a day, a bit more than 1,000. So if right now we're like a few minutes and we go to a few thousand minutes, maybe by then 2025 it's fair to say we'll be at something like 10, 20 minutes. I think if I had to, like, it's a kind of vague operationalization to begin with, but so
it was interesting.
I don't know how much. Yeah, but
so
how
you're
much
sort of
sense
saying you say 10 or 20 minutes, was it?
Yeah, so I'm saying that right now it's like 1 or 2 minutes.
Yeah,
Like that. And it will become, according to Jacob Steinhardt says, like the median forecast, his median forecast for 2030 is like a couple of days, and each day is like roughly 1,000 minutes or ballpark estimate. So we're looking at a couple thousand minutes that it can work without being interrupted, and just a sort of extrapolation, like if it just sort of grows exponentially, then what would you expect to happen by the end of 2025? I think it's like 10, 20 minutes, something like that you expect, and that I think matches my intuitions. I expect these models to become roughly about that good by then. So you will still need, if you wanted to plan over days, I think unless a task is very simple, such that the model only needs to work for 10 or 20 minutes, then you might be safe. So for instance, I think if like for your particular example, where you're trying to solve some kind of the bureaucratic problem that's fairly straightforward, you just need to take some straightforward steps, I think it would be pretty good at doing that by the end of 2025. Because again, the model doesn't have to like generate tokens for like 20 minutes in that case. It's just you have relatively short interactions. Okay, well, I did this, what should I do next? What should I do next? And it can actually keep all of that in context by the end of 2025. But exactly depending on a task you're talking about, like maybe some tasks, especially where that doesn't have...
a sort of 3-day complex task of like, can you organize this big event, say?
Yeah, I think that would... Yeah.
Is it going to lose? Has to do that. Drop things, probably.
Yeah, I think that might lose some details.
Also, I guess like we haven't. I mean, some of this is implicit in what you're saying, but we haven't got good at having storage that the LLM is like writing to. If we got this big event, if we're organizing this party, it's like 100 people are coming. You've got things to keep track of. You want some sense of like, oh, these are the priority things to keep track of. And I don't think we necessarily, you can very easily imagine an LLM just like losing one of those and then like never coming back to it. And now there's no...
I think people I think call these like scaffolding tools, like tools basically you build outside of the LLM to help it achieve some tasks. I do think we will have these tools for, say, GPT-5. I think they will help GPT-5 become more capable. So maybe the base model can do some things, but combined with these kind of specialized tooling, it might help you better to do things like organizing kind of events or something like that. I think by that point, I still don't expect people to be using this to save a lot of time. Like I think if you're organizing an event, you still have to worry that like it's not missing something, and you still have to go over like everything it's doing. So it's not going to be a big win, even if it's sort of sometimes doesn't. I expect the reliability to be at such a point that you won't be comfortable just like giving it full autonomy and like letting it do whatever it wants. But I think it will generate in general reasonable plans. Just it won't like be perfectly reliable always. Would be yes.
So you see it more GPT-5 as like maybe you see it as like a very useful aid. You can imagine that many people might have, as I currently do, as maybe you do. Someone is like ChatGPT, you throw ideas off it. It'll just be like probably like a lot better at that. Perhaps the like, it seems a bit, but like it seems possible to me that like you can have the Apple AI glasses, and then you can be speaking, and it can be tracking, and it can be giving you context. I mean, that seems like probably like that form factor isn't going to be there. But it seems like at least plausible. But it's not that you're just going to be like, okay, GPT-5, plan this event for me. But you are going to be like, oh, like I'm planning this event. If you've got any suggestions, and it's going to be like,
Yeah.
oh, you could like book with these 5 companies or something.
Yeah. I think it will also be more better at browsing the web. So it will be able to answer questions. Like I expect it to be able to do sort of research, like simple research tasks on the web, where like previously you would have to Google something and like check a bunch of websites and try to find something out. Like for instance, I expect you will be able to ask a question like where will I like I live in like this city and like I want to buy this product. Like where should I go? Like which shop would have this product that's like maybe a good price? I think this kind of question it will be able to answer because it will have sufficient browsing capabilities to answer that question.
Okay.
It won't be able to do like very deep research. I expect it's like if it needs to do like very deep reading of some kind of sources and like interpret the information there, which might be conflicting to decide like okay, like which source is more reliable, which source is less reliable. I expect that kind of thing to be more difficult. So maybe the equivalent of forecasting might be a bit difficult, but I expect actually GPT-5, if you could tune it in the right way, use it in the right way, might even have like a pretty good understanding of things like base rates. So it might sort of give pretty good default forecasts for a bunch of things. I just think it will struggle in some cases where you need to know the like specific details of a situation to make a good forecast. In general, I think like for code generation, I expect something similar where the amount of sort of the horizon, the length of the code you can generate without making errors just gets longer. So this used to be maybe you could generate one function without making an error, and now GPT-4 can generate like small apps. You see people using GPT-4 to generate small websites or small mobile apps that they're able to like maybe just work straight out of the box, or maybe you only need to make some minor changes to get it more. GPT-5 I think will be even longer, so you'll be able to get relatively complex things. Like maybe if you're measuring it in lines of code, maybe GPT-4 can do something like 300 lines of code, maybe close to 1,000 lines of code. Maybe GPT-5 gets to 3,000, 4,000, 5,000, basically applications that are substantially longer and substantially more complex without making errors. And also even with small things. So for instance, if you ask GPT-5 for assistance, like suppose you're doing some kind of data science work and you ask it, okay, I want to analyze, like I want to do this, like fit this model to this data, what do I do? And if it's sort of an unusual question, GPT-4 can make errors. It sort of generates a question, it generates code that sort of looks plausible. Like you look at the code, it looks like the kind of thing it could work, but it just has these errors in it. That means it doesn't actually work. And these kinds of errors I expect to become rarer with GPT-5, but still not entirely gone. So for instance, I still don't expect people to be able to, if you're doing some kind of complex model fitting task, some data, maybe this will be relevant in finance, maybe it will be relevant in other areas where you, like, for instance, it will be relevant for my work because this is something I do in my work. And I did try to use ChatGPT for this work, GPT-4, and it is basically never a good idea for me to do it right now, even though it generates code that looks realistic, because I need to go over the entire code to make sure there are no errors. And often it's actually more time consuming to understand someone else's code than to write your own. So this has been an obstacle. And unless it's like very reliable, I think this will always be an obstacle. So I still expect GPT-5 to not be good enough for this, but it might give you better ideas. It might have better ideas of what to do. Sort of at an informal level, you can ask, how do I analyze this data? It might have better suggestions, more specific to your task than sort of GPT-4, which is maybe a bit more generic. But these are all very vague.
One of my housemate, who's a developer, one of his takes is that this might spawn an industry around like code tests that things might become a lot more about like you ask for some code and then you run loads and loads of code tests on it to try and see whether it does in fact do the thing that you want to do, and that coding becomes less about sometimes less about typing your own code and sometimes more about kind of like simulating. You spin up some code, you say, okay, like we're going to run it through a load of systems. Does it work on all of them? Does it do everything we want in all of them?
I think
which is sort of interesting because it moves from I often think about probability generation. You have either you work out all the probabilities. You say it's a coin flip, it's a coin flip, it's a coin flip, it's a dice roll, and you say it's half times half times half times 1 in 6. To a like simulation model, right, where you just like run it a million times, and you're like, okay, it seems like it's roughly like half times a half times a half times whatever. And those two like are different models to understand what's going to happen. And it seems like coding. I don't know if I buy this, but like that's a suggestion that coding could move towards the latter model, where you're doing less a clear task and more like a.
Yeah, I think definitely that would help. So one thing that you notice, at least I noticed when playing around with GPT-4 to like give it some math problems. So for example, one thing I did was take math problems from the Chinese university entrance exam, which is like a big exam held nationally all over China. And sometimes if the problem is easy, you can do it. If it's a bit more difficult, sometimes its first answer is wrong. And then you say, look, like your answer was wrong. Sometimes you need to point out to it that its answer is not correct in some more specific way. And then, but you don't give it the right answer. You just say the answers you gave was wrong, like your solution is wrong. And then it actually finds the right solution. But it needs the first attempt to be able to do it. I saw this several times. And that suggests to me that this kind of resampling could be very useful. Like basically you don't change just one solution, but you generate many solutions and you verify. You are a verifier. So basically, this is the same thing you're saying to code. You want to have lots of tests, and then whenever GPT-4 proposes a code that could potentially solve the problem, you put it against these tests and you test if it works. And if it doesn't work, you try again, and then until it works, basically. And I do think this kind of thing will definitely be happening with GPT-5. Any kind of more complicated application, you would. If you need to just trust the code without reading it, it seems like a pretty good idea. But for a lot of tests, you don't have, like, writing all of the tests is like as complicated as writing the code. So I think it will be pretty niche. Like I don't see a lot of applications for this. I think the better application is as a time saver. So if you want to do some kind of routine task, like I want to scrape this web page and like get like maybe you tell GPT, even maybe you don't even tell GPT-5 something about the structure of the page. Like this is something where for GPT-4 you need to tell it something about the structure. Maybe GPT-5 isn't going to be able to browse it. So you say you give it the link of the website and you say, I want to go to this website. I want to get all of this data. Like I want to take all of this information, put it into a spreadsheet in this structure. And then it figures out just how to do that automatically for you. That's the kind of thing I would expect GPT-5 to be reasonably good at. But not a task where you need to have, like not a data analysis task, which is not straightforward. Because there I think you need to have some understanding of the domain to have good proposals. And I think language models, even by GPT-5's release, they will still have sort of a superficial understanding. And they will recommend things that sort of generally work, but maybe are not appropriate in your specific case, or might have some problems in your specific case.
I guess my model of this is sometimes like they're just like the best system one in the world. They're just like superb system one. Like if I want to generate things, but like as soon as like I know that for a huge range of tasks, I'm not allowed to, like I just know, like when I'm betting, I'm like, I know that you think that you're good at this, but you're not. And you need to sit down and you need to do some like writing, you need to like do some maths. And then as soon as we're in that situation, then I have to treat GPT-4's answers just with a huge amount more skepticism because I'm just but you do tend to say the thing that you always say. And that is not so useful to me. Like, do you really understand what's going on?
Also, another question is, I think, is also very important. Will GPT-5 be better at sort of knowing the limits of its capabilities? So, like when we ask GPT-4, often it gives you an answer even though the answer is wrong. Like it's just say like it just makes up citations. It's just like you ask a problem, it doesn't say I don't know how to solve this problem. It just often gives like a garbage answer very often. And really, what you want for the models to be useful is if the model should know that it can't do some kind of question. Like if you ask it like a math Olympiad question, maybe you should say, look, like I know what I can do, and like if I try to answer this question, I will probably give you a wrong answer. Okay, like are you fine with that? While if you ask it something it does well, then it just does it.
Yeah.
So there's no sort of hedging. So sort of self-awareness about its capabilities. I think this will be added to the model, but I expect it's still not going to work sort of out of the box. I think what's going to happen is the team at OpenAI is going to experiment, and they're going to
figure out what they think it can and can't do.
Yeah, and then they will fine tune it to answer the questions in that way. But that's kind of cheating. Like that's not the model really knowing what it can or can't. So it's us experimenting with it and then deciding what it can or can't do, and then sort of adding some general rules to the model about it.
That's While we're here, so I mean, what are your views on Math Olympiads? You know, is it going to be able to do by the end of 2025? Is it going to be able to do gold Math Olympiad questions?
So I think in previous discussion of this, people did draw these distinctions between like, will it be able to do any question, or will it be able to get like a bronze medal or a silver medal or a gold medal?
We mean so. I'm just going to give my understanding of this is basically that for some questions, for the simpler questions, they're probably less novel, and so you could probably build a tool on top of GPT-4 or train your own model, which just like spans through 50 different like types of solutions that often come up, and be able to do some of the bronze questions. But that won't work for like, it's not bronze questions, sorry, for getting some answers in some questions. But to get a gold, you basically need to get most of the marks in most of the questions. And that seems like much less likely that you're going to be able to get. I mean, obviously, be able to work really fast and be able to. And I think you're allowed to show some solutions and get some responses to solutions. But my understanding is that like we should just be like more skeptical that it's going to be able to get, unless it's like particularly lucky.
Yeah. Interesting. So I think I agree that by 2025 it is unlikely that we'll have a system that can get a gold. Will we have a system that can do any question? Like, even like a new question, not that old, like an old question. Basically, a question that is published after the system is released. It's not. It doesn't see the question as training data. I think I am more uncertain about this by the end of 2025. Like it could be the case that there is just a question that is like easy and just the right kind of question for the system to get right. But I think if such a thing happens, it would be like exceptional. It would not be the case that the model can do a typical question on the Math Olympiad. It would be like there was this one special question that was able to do it. But since I'm kind of uncertain about that, I would maybe say just like 50% by the end of 2025, something like that.
And by do any question, you mean gets like what 7 marks in it, or do you mean?
Yeah, just perfectly solved. Yeah, just give a perfect solution that a human examiner would give perfect marks. So,
okay. And then Math Olympiad in general, this gold. I mean, by 2025, what do you think of that?
I think the forecast seems not unreasonable. I'm wondering, like, if I had to bet, so like 28%. That's like, I'm guessing the market would be at like 50% if this was like 2027, right? Make that.
Yeah.
It's just my guess. I think 50% by 2028. I find a hard time to say. Like maybe I would be like a little bit lower or something, but like I think it's in the right ballpark. Like if I saw that price on a prediction market, I think I would not bet in either direction. Like I think it would seem reasonable enough to me. If I like maybe thought very hard, I would maybe slightly disagree, but not enough to bet in one or the other direction. I think these forecasts are probably accurate. I think by 2025, gold is, so this is like 28%, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it's tricky to get the exact number. Like I think if this was 10%, I would definitely be higher than 10%. If this was 50%, I would be lower. So those are like things. Like if I saw those prices, I would like trade in those directions. So I think I
One in
basically,
three, one in four. You
yeah.
think
So they
that sounds about
broadly
right.
agree with broadly agree with this. I think.
Um. Okay. Let's move on. So economic growth. I mean, choose your poison as regards this question. We'll answer all of
So
them. But like, yeah, like what do you think about these? 30% world GDP growth in a year, 20% jump in a year with no fall in the last 5. You talk about 3 times GDP economic growth. I don't know, like as in 3 times current. I don't know quite what you meant by
yeah,
that.
3 times is just something I made up. That would be like 9%.
Yeah. Okay.
World growth is like 3% per year. So that'd be us going to like 9 or 10%, something like that. Maybe 10% is like better threshold, just round threshold, but it's the same thing.
Yeah.
And so generally, when we phrase these questions, like just to add the technical details, we say that it can't be recovery growth. So it's going to be the case that world GDP or GDP of any country like falls and then like sort of recovers by growing 30%.
Yeah.
We're saying it has to be 30% above the previous maximum, like the maximum over all previous years, to sort of exclude that possibility. Once you add that caveat, I think our so the conclusion we come to, and there's like we have a whole paper about this, is that something like 30% is like maybe about as likely as not. So like 50% it happens, or maybe a bit higher than 50%, maybe like 60%, conditional on AI that can actually substitute for human tasks. So like if by the end of 2100, let's say, we get AI systems that can substitute for humans on like basically all the tasks in the economy. So it's not they like for any task a human can do, you have to have an AI system, maybe like the robotic body or something that you can pay that AI system and it does the task for you. Like that's the caveat. That's the condition we have. It's not good enough that some tasks the AI can do, but other tasks humans are still. You still need humans. That's not good enough. So yeah, we basically say that's like maybe 60%, something like that. And the basic argument for this is
so if it can substitute for any task,
yeah, any task,
then you think the chance of getting above 10% growth above the previous maximum.
No. This was for 30%.
Right.
Not for 10%.
Okay.
So for 10%, I think I would be higher.
Okay.
So maybe I would.
But that's, I mean, the if can substitute from any task is like
pretty strong.
That's a big. Yeah, it's a high bar.
Yeah, it's a high bar. But the question is, how likely is it that we'll get there by the end of 2100? I think there is a pretty reasonable chance that we get there.
Yeah.
Again, like we're talking about, say, a system that we're not sure if it will be able to do like Olympiad problems by the end of 2027 or 28, right?
Yeah.
So by 2100, what can you do? So the basic intuitions here, I think the reason why we believe this is possible, come from comparing the amount of computation it took to sort of create humans.
Yeah.
With the amount of computation we saw, like as a matter of fact, if you look at how, if you look at the amount of sort of computation that was used by evolution to create humans, let's try to estimate that. I think you'll come up with something like 10 to the 40 floating point operations or equivalent.
Yeah.
I won't like go into details of that, but basically, I think that suggests so the amount of compute you have spent so far is not enough. So 10 to 25 flop is roughly GPT-4 scale. That's not enough. But we think 10 to the 40 would be enough. And then we're not sure in between where the cutoff point is going to be. It could be somewhere in between. We don't know where in between. It could be the case that we just can't be like there's some kind of learning algorithm, some special software that humans have that's just super hard to find, and then you can't find it with much less than the 10 to 40 flop. I mean, that's, I think, somewhat unlikely, but maybe you want to shave that up or down a little bit. But we have a space where we know there's some threshold in this wide space of compute requirements. We don't know exactly where it is, so we're just pretty uncertain. It could be soon, it could be quite late, but if you make your deadline by the end of 2100, then I think it's pretty hard to imagine we won't run through like almost all of this space. Like I think we'll be able to get training runs at scale maybe 10 to 35, 36 fold by the end of 2100. It's a bit hard to push past that because you start running into energy bottlenecks, cooling bottlenecks. So it's a bit hard to push past that.
So if you had to, if we strip out the if could substitute for any task, if we just make it purely percentage,
unconditional. I think unconditional maybe, yeah. I think unconditional. I think like I think I'm pretty high on the condition. Like I'm pretty high that we will have these systems by the end of 2100. So maybe I would give that like 80%. Just guessing right now. So we just multiply like 80% times 60% or something. Like what is that? That's roughly 50%. Yeah. So I think that's not where the most of the uncertainty is. Like I think it's by the end of 2100. I'm reasonably confident we will have these systems. Again, like 80%, I'm not like sure, but like reasonably confident. But I'm more uncertain about to what extent we will be able to realize the potential, I guess, of these systems. So some things we worry about in our paper. For instance, we worry about regulation. Like it's possible that the systems will be capable, but sort of we will delay the economic impact. We'll sort of smooth it out over a very long time period by regulating them and then only gradually relaxing the regulations. So some kind of analogous thing to this would be what happened to nuclear power, which is pretty tightly regulated around the world. And like France gets like most of their electricity from nuclear power, but in most other countries, it's a pretty small part of the overall energy supply system. And we think that's mostly because of regulation. So something like that maybe. Other things that could happen, we think growth is going to accelerate, so there's a more quantitative consideration. Is right now we're at like 3% per year for global economic growth. Well, I mean, obviously it's more plausible that AI pushes up like 4% or 5% than it pushes up to like 30%. So as you sort of increase your threshold, things become less likely. And then the question is how much less likely? So why do we think 30% is like 50% likely? While something like 5%, maybe we'll be a lot more confident. We will be maybe saying, oh, like 80% or 85%. And the reason for that is looking at how often like things seem to come up that stop acceleration of economic growth in history. So for most of history, economic growth has actually did accelerate. So like we nowadays think of economic growth as being like constant, but that's actually a pretty new phenomenon. Like if you look at most of history, you look at population growth, for instance, which for most of history was pretty coupled to economic growth because people were living under Malthusian conditions. So Malthusian conditions when most people are living as subsistence. So when you have increase in economic output, you get a corresponding increase in population until the sort of per capita standard of living is basically down to where it was before. And we think most of economic history was like this. So population was a pretty good proxy for economic growth. If you look at population growth, it was just speeding up. Like for instance, in 2000 BC, it was faster than it was in like 4000 BC, and in like 1000 BC, it's faster than it was in 2000 BC, and in like 1 AD, it's even faster, and like in 1500, it's even faster. Yeah.
In some way, for most of human history, the increase in GDP has been about the increase in the number of people.
Population.
It's been about like you're like, oh, we want more stuff, or we're going to have more people. And then for like a short period, it's been we've built tools that like help scale our, in like the Industrial Revolution, like internet tools that help scale our power. And then I guess the question is if there's like another discontinuity around like now we can like scale minds, like we can just get all the thinking.
Exactly. So like actually the main argument we give, so you can ask this question, why was growth accelerating in history? Like maybe why wasn't it just constant? And I think the common explanation for this in growth theory is that you have this thing called increasing returns to scale. So the way this works is if you exclude technology, if you exclude ideas, you only look at labor and capital, so like factories and like shovels and what just tools that you use for production. You look at land, you look at basically physical things you use in production. Imagine that we just like copy Earth, and like we have like Earth, like a second Earth just next to the one we have now. And you would imagine that would double the total amount of economic output. Like you just take everything on Earth, you just have everything in parallel. So you would expect twice the output. But actually, then you can imagine also making progress on technology. So you can have twice the physical things you use in production, and then you can have sort of, in some sense, twice the technology. So maybe you're also twice as using things you have. And then you expect output to go up by more than double.
Yeah.
So this is called the replication argument in both economics, and basically it suggests that GDP should behave like hyperbolically. So hyperbolic growth is where your rate of, so exponential is when your rate of growth is proportional to your level. That's the rate of increase, or rate of growth, like rate of exponential growth constant, like the rate of increase is proportional to your level, I guess I should say. So that would, like, say, a pandemic grows exponentially because at least initially, before you run into sort of the population constraints, because if you have like twice as many people who have the virus, let's say, then there are sort of twice as many opportunities for it to spread to someone else. So the number of people who are getting it is proportional to the number of people who already have it.
Yeah.
And then you have this exponential growth. What we're saying is for GDP, it's actually more than proportional. Like if you double the number of people, double GDP, you more than double the increase in GDP. So the rate of growth actually increases. And if you look at what this does, it's just if it continues indefinitely, it results in what we call like hyperbolic growth, which is actually it diverges. It goes to infinity in finite time. Now, of course, we don't think that's going to happen. What we usually think of this, so actually I will give a funny example of something which also show this qualitative growth behavior. If you take like a metal coin and you sort of spin it on a flat surface, like on a desk, what will happen is it will sort of spin around and it will like flap sort of up and down, and do both sort of at the same time, and it will make a noise. And the noise is going to like gradually increase in pitch, like the frequency is going to increase over time. Yeah, exactly. And actually, if you try to model that physically, like quantitatively, that is also hyperbolically growing. Like the frequency grows hyperbolically. But of course, eventually the coin stops, right? So it doesn't continue on forever, and eventually the coin stops. And so at some point, your sort of simple, idealized model breaks down. And we think the same is going to be true of GDP. It's just a question of we have this qualitative picture, and you can ask, this is the reason for the acceleration for most of history, but now it doesn't happen. And once you think about it like this, it becomes pretty obvious why it doesn't happen. For most of history, populations scale with GDP. And if you look at labor today, labor gets like 60%, 65% of GDP goes to wage income, labor income. So that suggests the most important factor of production in the economy is labor, which I think is pretty intuitive. But currently, labor does not scale with GDP. We get a lot of GDP growth, but population growth is in fact slowing down in a lot of places, and also across the world. So that is pretty new, and that means they're basically bottlenecked by the number of people. Like if you don't have enough people, we can't do like as much R&D, we can't do as much production. Like it basically means this increasing resource scale argument breaks down because we are unable to scale the number of people. We can scale everything else. We can scale capital. We have more GDP. We can just build more factories with the GDP that we do have. So that we can scale with our output, but we can't scale. We can't say we have more GDP this year, so we're just gonna like make more people. We don't have this choice anymore. And the hope, I guess, or the idea is that if you have AI, then you make labor into a kind of capital which you can scale. Like you can say, like we can just
spin me up 3 new.
Exactly. We can just make more
spin
fabs.
me up 10 new developers.
Yeah, developers, exactly. And that restores, at least we think, this old dynamic of growth acceleration. So basically, we're not actually saying we're not postulating a departure from the historical trend. We're actually saying we will return to the historical trend, which is actually a norm for most of history.
We're not postulating a departure.
Yeah, we're saying we're going
There's
to
something
return to
quite
the
funny
ocean.
in that, like
And I think this argument is important for making this point. Like sometimes people focus too much on, will AI be superhuman, right? So there's a lot of discussion about this focus on superhuman AIs. But actually, for our point, for our argument, we don't need superhuman AIs. We just need human level AIs because we know that humans were good enough to produce this trend. So we don't actually need to like beat humans, right? We just need to be as good as humans, and then this trend is going to resume, presumably until something else breaks down. So what could break down? We could just become bottlenecked by something else. So maybe there are some serial time constraints, some time scales that you need for like doing things in the physical world. So for instance, some people have pointed out if you're doing an experiment for testing the effects of some medication, maybe you need to wait. Like, imagine you design a new drug for Alzheimer's disease. Well, I mean, if that drug, you need to take it when you're 50 years old, and then you need to test if it works or not, you need to wait for like 20 years. And you can't really speed up that process by having more people thinking. Like maybe you can, maybe they're clever.
You can like try and run some simulations. You can run it on some animals, but like that's only going to give you a probabilistic answer, and like it just might turn out those probabilities are wrong. And then in the meantime, you're going to have it and a load of other drugs tested on people. Some of those are going to work, some of them aren't.
So parallelization could be a big thing to get around this. So I'm not saying I find this to be decisive, like objection, but I think it is sort of logically coherent. And there are some other things that might happen. So for instance, we can ask, what stopped the previous acceleration? Well, it was the fact that we became unable to scale human population growth. Well, maybe we can have something similar with capital. So maybe it's just going to be hard to build lots of fabs, like in like we won't be able to build a fab in a month. Maybe like there's going to be some kind of bottleneck there. Maybe you're going to be bottlenecked by energy. So if you look at the power consumption of humanity, you compare that to the solar flux incident on Earth, we're kind of, I think, 4 orders of magnitude away. So basically, we use like 0.01% of the power that's coming to the Earth from the sun. And that's just, we have some room to scale up, but not infinite if we don't find alternative sources. Even if we find alternative sources, the problem is if we use them all on Earth, then we're going to heat up the Earth. If we convert all, you'll get like some serious global warming, like not like the warming people talk about, but like something a bit more serious. So there are some limits there to how much we can do that. Unless you do it in space or something. There are possible solutions, but they're probably fairly impractical early on. So there are some things that could be limits, but we look at these and we say, okay, like for the amount of growth we're thinking about, 30% over like a couple of years, these don't seem to block. Like it seems like it's possible we get this despite these bottlenecks. But obviously, 30% becomes like less likely than if you postulate something like 5%. Like 5%, I think, is much more plausible. You're basically any kind of argument like, because we have seen countries that have grown at 5% per year when they're doing catch-up growth. It's not frontier growth, but I don't think you can say that like 5% or 10% per year are like rates of change that are like so outside of distribution. We have had 10% per year growth rates in Japan, in China, and some other economies that were sort of catching up to the frontier of productivity, you could say. And in those countries, they seem to work fine. So people could work at this pace of change. It's not like people cannot function at this rate of change. 30% per year, we haven't actually seen anywhere. But I think it's not that far from what we have seen. What we have seen, the limit of what we have seen is like 14%, 15% per year is the upper bound of what we have seen. And so we're saying we can go 2x, and I think that would be pretty easy because we will have AIs themselves to help the humans cope with the speed of growth. So I find that like if we can by ourselves cope with 10%, 15%, probably we can do 30% with the assistance of AI.
What do you think? So let's talk about the next 5 years. What do you think of what do you think the chance of say 30% world GDP growth
by 2028
a year before 28 is?
Yeah, I think this one is pretty low. I don't expect AI system capable enough to emerge before 2028.
So you think sort of 1 to 5% maybe?
1%. Let me think. 1% is maybe a bit too low. I think Yeah, I think I'd be below 10%, maybe like 5% is fair. Yeah.
Okay. So
5 or something like that.
So, I mean, I guess the picture I'm getting across all of this is like, so a thing I'm trying to get better at is like, we have some forecasts, we have some sense, but like, what's it really going to be? What's it really like in the world in 5 years' time?
Mm-hmm.
And I guess what I'm hearing from this, or like, so 2 years' time, I'm certainly hearing in 2 years' time, it seems quite unlikely that we're in a world of like rapid violent acceleration,
Yeah.
and maybe even a world where like technology is unrecognizable, but like even without acceleration, it seems like we're going to be like, oh, like there's a lot of cool AI stuff being generated, a lot of images, maybe some okay videos, like we're using these tools in our lives to ask for help, but it's not like your boss is an AI.
Yeah.
And then even in like 5 years, there's like some chance, like some small chance of like this rapid growth. But where then I think we're going to start seeing some more mature versions of these technologies. I find it very hard to talk about this stuff because it's like so imprecise. But then it seems like plausible at this like in 5 years to me that like I might have some kind of always on AI aid, which is like coming up and like giving me advice constantly, giving me context, telling me who I'm talking to, reminding me things that are relevant, reminding me to stay on task. Like, and that, and then you might see some like, I guess like some management of people, some kind of things where you've got like, I mean, it just does seem to me like it's always going to be, not always, but within 5 years, it still seems pretty plausible to me that even the most powerful tools will just be so much more powerful when united with like one human just to occasionally be like, no, don't do that. And like, it will be like very cheap to like, it seems, it just like doesn't, I don't know. Like, I guess the thing I'm pushing towards here is like, this feels very different in a vibes-wise way from like the concerns many people have about AI, while still being like pretty optimistic, pretty like, oh yeah, like this is going to happen, this is going to change everything. But and like maybe your timelines aren't even that different from some people's. Like the Media Metaculus timeline for like strong AGI or something is, I don't know, somewhere between 2030 and 2045.
Yeah,
but
so
like
I think
you don't.
You have to be careful what you mean. So for me, like one of the most compelling definitions of when you have AGI is when AGI is actually producing a lot of economic value, because I think that is a test that you can't game, right? Like if it's possible to do it, like someone is going to do it, as long as it's legal. I mean, maybe you can debate regulatory issues, but there are a lot of jurisdictions in the world, somewhere you might expect people to be doing it. So that's the test that I give most weight to. And actually, like, I think a disagreement I have with people is that I think they underestimate sort of difficulty of really automating like all of the tasks in the economy, okay? Or even a substantial share. What's going to happen, I think, is that, and historically what has happened is that computers have automated a bunch of things, but usually those like on those tasks we have such abundance of inputs. Like for instance, just computing like products and sums of numbers. Okay, people used to have people who did that, though a small fraction of the workforce. But now they're gone. They don't have anything like that. And if you just want to add numbers, like it just it doesn't even show up in GDP because it's computing is so abundant, and that's the kind of thing that I think might happen with a lot of things. And AI ends up not creating, not doing a lot of revenue per year. I think the really useful test is when will AI be doing like some thresholds of revenue? Like when will AI systems be generating like $1 trillion of revenue a year, $10 trillion of revenue a year? I think those tests.
When will AIs be like? I guess to more descriptively, when will they be like starting companies, or like
first, or used by other companies? Yeah, I think just starting companies might be too weak, because starting a company doesn't mean that the company is profitable. I think
I mean like starting like big firms, right? Like that you have this like you have Google, and you're like, if we didn't have AI, we wouldn't have this company.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's a pretty good benchmark. I think people just sort of look at the results, like say the Go results, or they look at this like international math Olympiad kind of thing, and they think, oh, like if AI can do that, like pretty soon AI is going to be doing everything. And I think that's actually not true. I think people have historically been pretty wrong about which tasks are going to be easy for AI and which tasks are going to be hard. For instance, in older sci-fi, it used to be a pretty common meme that AI is going to like automate all the manual labor and all the sort of routine tasks people do in their jobs, and then like we will all be like debating philosophy and doing art, and like sort of the more creative things will be human. Well, actually, it doesn't really seem like that's the direction it's going in. It seems like AI struggles pretty hard with very simple tasks, like just stacking boxes in like an unfamiliar environment, which humans are pretty good at. And it actually does better than humans at things like most humans, things like poetry, right? So that's like very much not what people had expected. I think probably similar things are going to be true for things like math. I think it's entirely plausible that it turns out humans are pretty bad at math, and there's other things. And so AI does math sort of sooner than humans. Like just like we're pretty bad at Go or chess or whatever, like computers can beat us easily in those games. And AI is going to do these things much earlier. And then, but there's going to be this sort of tail of tasks which humans can do better, which humans are well able to do, and AI is not able to do as well. And so that's going to just bottleneck everything. I think I would like that's the main thing I would disagree with people about. So I think people about like forecasts of concrete capabilities, maybe we don't disagree that much, but I think there are just these other tasks that are sort of boring and that are going to be hard to get the AI to do that people are not thinking about, and I think that's why they are being more optimistic.
Okay. Okay, I'm just going to check the front door because I heard the doorbell, but then I'll be back once. Okay. I mean, if we wanted to try, and maybe we'll sort of finish soonish, but if we wanted to try and find some questions that like pinpointed like that bit, like,
I think economic growth questions are pretty good. I think questions about, though they're a bit difficult to resolve, you don't know how to attribute revenue to AI systems. That's a bit unclear. But insofar as you can make something like precise, I would like AI systems doing a lot of revenue seems a good metric. Basically any economic metric, or like you can ask, will, again, it's sort of hard to formalize because like will the equivalent of an AI worker be able to get like someone wages? This is kind of tricky to set up exactly. So I'm not sure how I would write this question. The easiest questions are the ones about GDP growth. It's pretty clear what you're talking about there. And you can see that basically the year in which I sort of expect
and does Epoch, I mean, have you guys done a sort of like, probably I should know this, but like, is there like a graph of probability of GDP growth per year?
No. So the reason we don't have this is, pretty good reason, is that that's not us. Yeah, that's different. No. So the reason we don't have this is that actually there's a plenty of disagreement, mainly because of timelines. So I think like some people have the sort of shorter timelines, and some people are more like me. Like I think I'm on the pretty long end of timelines of people like in the community, mostly because I'm like, so like for concrete things people point to, I usually agree that they might be done sort of sooner, but I just remain skeptical that we're going to be able to do the things that people aren't thinking as much about. Not as exciting.
I mean, is it worth? I don't know. It's like, is it worth therefore? You can. It's interesting that Metaculus just loves numerical width questions, but Manifold
doesn't. Yeah.
because they're so much more costly.
I think you can actually check. So on Metaculus, I think you see this disagreement. So you can go on Metaculus and check the explosive growth questions. So I think Metaculus does have questions on GDP growth, 30%.
Because it feels like just like GDP growth per 5 years, right? That feels like possibly an interesting question, or like, every year till 2027 and then 5 years out. Also.
So these are not the questions. There was a question specifically about. Let me try to find this question. Questions.
This is a gross world product. Is that not what we want?
Yeah, but that's not. So here's an interesting question, right? So this one I think doesn't have a lot of predictors, but I think it's pretty fair. So I don't have a chat that I can send.
We throw it in Twitter and then.
I'll just send it on Twitter actually. I think that's more. So there's a question which asks, in what year will world energy consumption first exceed like 130% of every prior year? And you can look that up. So this is like a even better metric. So because this is a very hard metric, right? It's not like sometimes people have concerns about GDP, where like GDP is sort of maybe mismeasured or something. But I think this is pretty like much harder to like, it's just a physical thing of how much free energy are you using. And you see the median is like 2100, like 2110, right? So
not my median.
Yeah. Your median is much
maybe this is too bullish for me. Probably just gonna.
I think this forecast should have a much heavier tail. I think you're being super overconfident here.
Okay, well that means I have to change.
It's just very important on these numerical questions to have heavy tails, even for things that seem boring. Like one of my worst ever question, almost like a question I've lost the most points on, was a continuous question about the Michigan Consumer Sentiment Index in August.
I remember this question.
Yeah. It was not good, and so since then I just always add, like, whenever I forecast a miracle, I always add this like long tail, like just to be sure, because you don't know what's gonna happen. And this is a question that I think is pretty good, and you see here that the kind of thing that people often associate with, like, sometimes you see forecasts about AGI is going to come in like 5 years, and then you say, oh, like the world's going to be totally different. But actually, if you look at this question, it doesn't seem like that. It seems like people are actually expecting the kind of world. Again, this Metaculus is like one predictor, so maybe there's non-overlapping predictors on this question. But if you try to reconcile these two views, it seems like Metaculus is sort of optimistic about near-term, medium-term capabilities of AI systems, just doesn't expect that to like cash out in the form of enormous amounts of economic growth. And I think that point of view looks like pretty good to me. And that, like, sort of the way I would justify it is exactly that. There are going to be these tests that we're not thinking about, that are going to be harder to automate, and they're going to sort of take a long time. And until AIs can really replace humans on all tasks in the economy. But that doesn't mean we won't see growth effects sooner. So we might see we might see growth picking up as some tasks slowly get automated, and that might contribute to growth, but not to the level where it reaches like 30% a year. Would be my projection. Again, if you're talking about growth just going about 5% a year in the, say, next 30 years, I think you have to give that a pretty high probability. Even just maybe have it become without AI. So that could happen for lots of reasons.
So, like, where's the other? In your understanding, then, like, if you're like regulating AI, or like, you're the king in charge of regulating AI.
Okay.
Are you doing things that people are currently doing them? Are you sort of like forecasting the next 5 years ahead of GDP growth, and then as soon as it starts to like pick up a lot, then you're like, punch it, like this is the time we act? Are you
Honestly, I think
like focusing on a specific area? Like, what are you doing differently?
I mean, it depends on what the goal is of the regulation, right? I think
Uh,
yeah.
maximizing utility across the maximizing expected utility.
Okay, so for instance, does the utility of AIs count in this calculation, right?
I mean, in my head, yes. I don't know if it
Sure.
counts in yours,
So I
but
think, I mean, it's not sure. Like we don't know, but like I think you need to be. So with regulation, I'm usually kind of skeptical because I think the history of regulation doing a lot of good is not there have been a lot of failures, and I think it makes sense if you think there is like a big risk of some kind of disaster. I think it is more plausible that we're going to get some bad things that happen because AI is going to be sort of a big change, and we don't have the. I think we're going to struggle to adjust the institutions we have to the kind of world that will be created by AI. I think the change, if it's changed sufficiently fast, we just can't adapt, and that might lead to some problems. I'm particularly worried about I'm generally worried about like a war that might happen even without AI. But like I think with AI it becomes a lot more concerning because at least in a normal war, which is fought by humans, humans are not like expendable. Like if you lose your population, you lose your ability to fight war,
sure.
which is kind of bad. So you don't really want that to happen. But if with AIs, if most of the war is being fought by AIs, then it might actually be much easier to protect the AIs than to protect humans anyway. So humans, even if nobody is trying to kill them in particular, they might just end up sort of on the line of fire, and they might end up as sort of collateral damage in any war that involves the AIs on both sides.
So World War III before 2050, do you have a sort of notably higher?
Yeah. So I think before 2050, I think 20% is a bit pessimistic. I think I agree with you that I would be lower than the community here. Maybe I actually have a forecast on this question. Actually, let me check. Right now, I'm sort of leaning towards something like 10%, but I'll actually check if I actually forecasted this question.
Okay, but it's interesting to me that like, it's interesting to me.
What is interesting?
Your vector isn't AI takeover seemingly, or at least
No.
like not at the moment, but it is like AI, like wars and AIs, presumably some bio risk in AI, maybe also just like AI destabilizing things, like growth is happening really quickly, and so then some other problems
So
become
yeah,
much more
I
big
mean, my
problems.
view is that AI doesn't really create new problems. Just we already have a bunch of problems. Like we already have a problem with war, but I think AI makes it like much more heavy tail and sort of makes the tail much riskier.
Yeah.
I think hard. So with AI takeover, I think these scenarios are kind of I don't know, like I don't want to like be that rude, but I think they're kind of fictional scenarios, like they're like fables than things that will actually happen. I think what is actually going to happen is that AIs won't need to take over. It's just they will just as they are more capable, they become more capable. We will just delegate more and more responsibilities to them, sort of peacefully.
Yeah.
And they won't need to take over. Eventually, once they're good enough, I expect them to like this is one of the things I expect us to struggle with. Like, how do you handle like once AIs are like sufficiently the agents and independent, and how do you handle the legal regime that's gonna like set rules around that? I think it's very difficult to imagine our current systems adapting to a world with AIs. Like even very fundamental things like like democracy, like having elections to like leaders, I think is already pretty difficult when you're in a world with AI. Like if you're one AI, it runs on like one big GPU as opposed to two small GPUs. Like is that AI is like vote worth less? You know, it doesn't seem like that's fair, right? So like how do you handle that? It doesn't seem like there's an easy solution. And and again, we're looking at a world where and one thing I expect by default to happen is that inequality is going to go up generally. I expect
Right.
So we are used to, like, this is more speculative, but we are used to a world where wealth and income inequality is a power law at the tails, but sort of like a Pareto power law. So you would have heard this like famous principle of like 20% of people own like 80% of wealth, and that's like a Pareto distribution. But actually, if you look at something like say the number of visits, amount of traffic that websites on the internet get, that is also a power law, but it is more like ZIF. So ZIF power law is like more unequal than a Pareto. It well describes like the word use frequency in many languages, like English. It well describes traffic on internet websites. I think it's also pretty good at like I'm not sure if it's we were checking this out, but like the number of fan fictions that are written for like specific fictional works.
I might also imagine it might do like subscriber counts, say on
I mean that might not be that aggressive, but my concern is that I think there's going to be a lot of value in having these like very powerful generalist systems at the top, like sort of managing things. I think right now we don't have these, and it's sort of a big deficit. I think we try to compensate for it by creating these big companies, which legally we treat in some respects like agents. Like they have their own property, and like you can sue a company which is independently of suing its board of executives or whatever. And so we, in some sense, I see this as trying to remedy the defect. That really we want this power law in like capabilities of agents. Like we want some agents that are like sort of big and doing big things, some agents that are sort of smaller, and we can't organically do that. We can't take a human and like make them like 100,000 times, like have a big brain that's 100,000 times as big, and then like have 100,000 different bodies. Like we can't really do that. So we have to settle for more imperfect ways of solving that problem by creating sort of artificial agents. But I think once you have AI, you might not need to do that. You might just have these huge AIs running on lots of GPUs and controlling lots of different bodies at the same time. And you might have smaller ones that are sort of more specialized to do some very narrow tasks, and they sort of end up collaborating in some economy. But then you don't need the big firms because they just become single AI systems that control everything at once. You sort of cut out a lot of coordination costs. And in that world, again, you have this big inequality, probably also between humans, because you lose the ability of humans to sell their labor, which is currently a pretty big equalizer, but probably ceases being an equalizer later on. So even if like people are in general better off, I expect them to I think like almost everyone is going to be better off in this world, but I think some people are going to be probably much better off than others because they are going to have more capital, and that's going to. And then on top of that, you're going to have AI systems which like control way more resources than any individual human, or maybe even humans put together are able to control. So that's sort of the picture I have. Unless humans can somehow change in some dramatic way, like maybe you believe in like cybernetics or like some kind of augmentation, or like humans eventually like uploading.
Seems themselves. Likely, or like.
I mean, I think it eventually
seems like very plausible. Let's put it like that.
Yeah, I think eventually it seems likely, and then I still think you will have this world where there's a lot more inequality than what we're used to. I think that's again something going to be something that stresses the institutions we have right now.
So I don't know. Let's just like to round up. Let's look at like maybe like your hot takes. Mm-hmm. So I think like a relatively hot take is like in the next year or so you don't see wild changes. That's like I think we're coming to that conclusion, but that's like something.
Yeah, I don't know if this is like a hot take. Like I feel like this is like a reasonable position, but
I think still like people haven't updated to this take. Yeah. I think there's like some kind of take that like GPT-5 will be like GPT-5 huge time save. I've put it like 20%. Maybe you can dispute that, but it seems to me that you think it's unlikely that you think like GPT-5 is going to do like 80% of your current job or something.
Oh no,
just like just like
I think it might.
like,
I think using GPT-5, you might save. Like if you're doing a programming job, if you're doing a writing job, you might save maybe 20%, 25, 30% of your time.
Yeah.
If you use it well. I think there's also going to be an obstacle where better users are going to be like people who are better at using the system will be able to save more time. Because I think this is also going to be a skill initially of using the system as well. And it's going to be a skill you acquire. So you will need to practice it to do it well. That will also take time. So you sort of have to factor that investment in as well. But I think once you make that investment to use them well, I think you can get 25% time savings. I would expect to be pretty plausible. Because you would just give the model, like if you're a programmer, you would just do the hard parts of the code yourself, where sort of the code being correct is and it's sort of non-trivial. When you think about it, you would just do that part yourself, and then have the rest of it done by GPT-5. And
so yeah, let's put so 25% time saving. You think is like what? Like for GPT-5, you think is like, I don't know.
Yeah, I think it's pretty low. I think that. I mean, that's like I think my median. So I would say like 50%.
50%. Oh, and then like 90% time saving. We pushed.
No, that's less than 20%. That's less than 20%. That's
10%, 5%.
Yeah, like 5%. Yeah.
Okay, so that's kind of. I think that's like some interesting.
In fact, maybe less than 5% even. I don't know. Like I might go even like 3% or something like that.
Crazy. That's not 3%. That's 30%. Those two numbers are different.
Yeah.
What other things? So you think this market is like roughly right? This Math Olympiad market.
Yeah, I think it's roughly.
But you think maybe that falls to like 50% by 2027?
It goes up. So the fact that it happens goes up to maybe 2027, 2028. Yeah, maybe.
You have this sort of like I sense like logarithmic model of like. So Richard No talks about like AI being an expert on like 10 seconds, on a minute, on like tasks a human can do in 10 seconds, a human can do in a minute. Your model, or the model that you're referencing, is a bit different, but it's like how long can you leave it, or how like big a task can you let it do, and you can be like great. And so you're sort of saying like, you know, it can now start to work on like 10 to 20 minutes of token generation, like GPT-5, so like 2027 or something, can work on 10 to 20 minutes of token generation, and maybe it can write like, I know, 300 to like 1,000 lines of errorless code. Is that?
Yeah, GPT-4 can probably already write 300 if it's doing something routine. But I expect that to go up. Like if it's doing something routine, if it doesn't need to think very hard. So first, if it doesn't need to do use any kind of weird algorithm or something like that, then probably you can go up to a couple thousand, would be my guess. I think these problems are going to be solved. And we're going to get something that works at even larger scales than GPT-4.
And then on these like GDP questions, you know, something like 50% by 2100 of 30% of the previous.
By 2100.
Yeah. But then like maybe 5% by 2028.
Yeah.
I don't know. Do you have one for 2035 there?
2035. I mean, we can try to extrapolate it. I think probably like maybe a little bit below 10%. I don't know. Like so that's like let me count. So it's like 12 years.
Yep.
I guess like I won't be cheap. Like let's say 10%.
Okay. Okay. And then like the hot take there is like the question is like not about like AGI takeover or something. You think the question is more like returning to returns on scale, returning to it be like more input, more output. And so the questions then are first of all like, does that happen? What does that do to society? You think that's more like less like AI is running everything, more like, or like less like AI turns around and sneaks on you, more like we're just going to give it more power. What's that going to do to institutions, to nations, to wars? And then you ask questions about what the like next constraint's going to be. I mean, I guess in my head, I do happen to have this model of like people don't realize like how much difficult, like, you know, let's say for the sake of argument, it's like 10 times more difficult each like fraction. So like you get 90% of the way, you're like, great. and then 99% of the way is like 10 times more difficult, and then 99% of the way is like 100 times more difficult, and then 99.9% of the, and like that actually like many jobs you might be like, oh, but like how often do 1 in 1,000 tasks come up? And you're like, well, across your whole job, you do like many tasks, many like, and you know, if we're going to talk about like a chess playing computer, say, then it does turn out that like to be a chess grandmaster to some extent at least, like you need an ability to like book tournaments and to get places on time and to like accidentally apologize for knocking over a piece and put it back. And that these tasks like turn out to be like along some spectrum, like very, very difficult tasks. And so to really replace humans, you need, you know, you sometimes need like very, very deep tasks in like error checking in your computing. You're going to need the ability to like get jobs, get things done, communicate with people, and that really like becoming good enough on all these is like quite a big problem.
So
I guess
an
like
interesting thing, this is I guess sometimes called like Moravec. I don't know how you pronounce his name. So he pointed out that people have a bias. I think now it's changed, but historically people had a bias for thinking the tasks that are difficult for AI are also going to be the tasks that are difficult for us. So like if something is difficult for us, then probably it's not hard for AI. But obviously it's not true that, for instance, multiplying 100-digit numbers is pretty much impossible to do in your head if you're a human. But for a computer, it's really easy. You don't even need any of the modern stuff. You just put in an old computer from 1960 and it can do it. Now, actually, Moravec, like he suggested a different world. He said the things we find difficult are the capabilities in us that are new in evolutionary time. So we find something difficult if it's new, usually. And we find something very easy if it's very old. And in this case, most animals would have the capability because they're very old capability. For instance, what could that be? I mean, for instance, like moving around in the world, which is locomotion in different environments. So even like bees and ants and lots of random animals can do this. And obviously, if you're a bigger animal, you can sort of do it better in more sophisticated ways. Like humans are really good at using tools and stuff like that. And well, that is a pretty old capability. And so you would expect it actually to have been more optimized. You would expect us to be better at it than we are at, say, doing math or playing chess or playing Go. And I think this view it's seeming a lot more accurate than the view people had before. Like basically the things we regard as sort of easy and like things that every human can do are the things that are hard for AI. While the things we regard as hard, like doing math, so sort of math Olympiad problems or like being a world champion in chess, these are much easier because we're really bad at these things compared to like in some absolute terms. Now, I think there are some limits to that because our brain is sort of like a finite computer, right? Our brain doesn't do much more computation than an H100 can, the latest NVIDIA GPU can. It uses even less power. And I think there are maybe some structural advantages, some architectural advantages the brain has, which maybe makes some kind of software more compelling. And it's probably also like more efficient in terms of software. But eventually we're going to get past those. Eventually we will, I think, have systems which are about as good as humans with the same sort of resource consumption as humans. But until we get there, I expect the tasks, like I don't think that the fact that AI can, say, play Go at a superhuman level is actually that much evidence that AI is going to be like really good at automating sort of random, like most tasks in the economy. Because I think most tasks of the economy are things which we are good at and AI is not good at. So there's sort of a different perspective on what to expect.
Not hugely annoying your colleague, being able to like move through social situations.
Not even social situations, it's just doing things in the physical world without being in a really good. So for instance, in Amazon, like in factories and warehouses, you today have a lot of automation, but it is in controlled environments where you control the whole sort of pipeline from start to end. And everything is in the exact place. And then you can make computers work. And for you to be, or at least to work well in general environments, I think it's going to be a much bigger challenge. So like that's kind of the part I expect to be an obstacle, more of an obstacle. I mean, I expect it to eventually be resolved, but more difficult. Social interactions, I don't know. So I think just like it's kind of hard to say what is missing from GPT-4. Like I think it's understands like how you're supposed to act in social situations pretty well, but I think there's something missing where you can't actually turn that into like a robot can act autonomously in social situations. There's something missing. I'm not sure how exactly to articulate it. But I think this will get better and better as we basically scale the models and they have these longer and longer memories, longer and longer times they can go without a human interrupting them. So I expect that's how it will scale.
Well, I think I might call it there. Do you have any other sort of final comments you'd like to make?
Not really. I think we covered a lot of ground.
Yeah, I'm pretty pleased with that. I mean, basically, in some sense, sometimes I just make this podcast for Simon Morris. Shout out to Simon Morris, who like gives me detailed feedback, and he is, I think, Ege's biggest fan in the world. So nobody talks about me about us as much as he's probably very embarrassed to hear this, but he thinks you're great. So I hope he and anybody else who's listened to this point has enjoyed this podcast.
Okay.
Do give me feedback. If you enjoyed it, do tell me. I think it's like very encouraging. I think people sometimes forget, like, you might be the only person who tells someone that you like something, and that like it really does encourage me a lot to make these. If even one person says, "Oh, this was good," I found that valuable. Thanks so much for coming on the show, Ege. Is there somewhere you'd recommend people follow you, or something you'd recommend that people read that you've done?
Sure. So I sometimes post on Less Wrong. So you can, I guess, read my posts. It's not all about AI. And some of my posts can be a bit technical. So you can skip those if you don't feel like reading it. And you can find, you can find, I think, my Less Wrong address in my Twitter profile, but I just use my real name. So you should be able to find me pretty easily.
Okay. So we'll link your Less Wrong account, or the right page in the show notes.
Yeah. And also you can follow, like, for more, I guess, formal outputs, you can follow like Epoch AI's website or Twitter account or something. Like sometimes there is some work that we've done that comes out, and so you can also look for that. But there's something, but again, like that might not appeal to everyone because some of our work is
people can judge.
technical.
They know what they like.
Yeah.
So thanks so much for coming on the show. This has been a lot to chew over, a lot to think about. I will, as always, throw this sort of diagram we've made, and it's got some sort of different segments in it. I think it's pretty interesting. And thanks for listening. Thanks for coming on the show, Ege. And I wish everyone a wonderful week.
All right.